Now, immigration is set to boost the UK's population to 70 million by 2026, according to new projections released by the Office for National Statistics. The projections show that over the 15 years from mid-2021 to mid-2036, the UK's population will grow by 6.6 million. That's nearly 10%, taking the UK's population to 73.7 million. The vast majority of the increase will be a result of immigration into the country, which will add 6.1 million people to our population. Earlier, I spoke to Daniel Sohage, director of the human rights organisation Stand for All and expert on migration and refugee policy, and Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Calais. And I started by asking Kevin whether he thinks these numbers are a cause for concern.
It is a problem. We can't continue having people coming to the UK in these sorts of numbers, but it is only an estimate or really a guesstimate. So we've got to take it with a pinch of salt. What we know is that we have too many people coming to the UK at the moment, and we really need to cut the figures down. And it's interesting to see that what the government are hoping to do to cut the numbers down.
Do you agree with that, Daniel, that there are too many people coming to this country?
I don't necessarily agree with Kevin on that. I do agree that these figures are very rough estimates, and the ONS admits that themselves, so do have to be taken with quite a pinch of salt, as Kevin said. But we still have massive vacancies, for example. We still have a need for people coming in and a very ageing population as well. So I think we need to look at these in the wider context of if we reduce immigration, what are we going to do about the economy, about jobs, about people's lives in general? So we have to look at it as a whole wider thing about what the needs of the country are, as well as, well, all these people coming in isn't quite the same as how many people do we need.
What do you think about that, Kevin? I mean, we are hearing that these new rules, which are designed to be part of the government's plans to reduce net migration, are coming into effect very shortly. So some of those working in the care sector, for example, won't be able to bring in their relatives. There will be this higher salary threshold and so on. Do you think those sorts of measures are the right ones when it comes to reducing net migration, but also dealing with the problem that Daniel has mentioned there, which is that in many parts of the economy, including the care sector, we are quite short of workers?
Yes, I mean, this will reduce the number of people coming into the UK. There's no doubt about that. What we have got to do is we've got to start paying people that work in the care sector. We've got to pay them better. We've got to attract people into that particular area of work. I mean, we have, I think it's something like 5 million inactive people. I think that's the right word. People that could possibly be working but aren't working. So we've got to do something to encourage them back to work. But the sad fact about this is that if we increase wages for people in the care industry and other industries where there are vacancies, and this is an area where we want to attract Brits or people living in the United Kingdom to go and work in, we're going to have to pay them more. Now, that may mean we have to increase taxation. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword here.
We've had some reaction to these figures, to some on the right of the Tory party, the former Minister Robert Jenrick saying that this increase with migration amounting to 92% of the population growth, that's not how you create a united country, he says. There's no democratic consent for this. The pace of change is far too fast. And we've got Suella Braverman talking about the need for an overall cap on migration numbers. Daniel, do you think that the rate of net migration into the country does cause problems for social cohesion?
I think we need to look at how we're looking at communities and how we're investing in communities. There's many studies have shown that actually one of the main things that reduces social cohesion is when they see political rhetoric about immigration rather than numbers of immigrants. Areas with higher immigration tend, not overall, but in general, to have lower rates of anti-immigration sentiment, but that's for multiple factors. So I think we need to look at our communities as a whole, what we're doing within them to support everybody. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that we're saying we aren't letting immigrants in. I mean, we've seen the talk repeatedly over the last 14 years of putting a cap on immigration. And we know in practical sense that doesn't really work because you need to have something that's flexible for the not only people coming in, who we're talking about genuine people with lives here, but also about the country as a whole and the economy. And I agree with Kevin that we need to increase wages for people to encourage more people who can work to be working in jobs. But even at the moment, we've got about 100,000, 150,000 shortfall in the care sector alone. And it's not just the care sector. We always focus on that. But there's huge gaps elsewhere. And these are trades which we can't just say, okay, you're inactive, you can work in there. We need people who have the skills to do it. And that's something that comes through. And the measures the government's bringing in at the moment don't impact on that, really. They're increasing minimum income requirements for spouses. Now, they make up a very small proportion of overall migrants and already can't access many services and benefits that people talk about. So we're not looking at a situation that really changes the nature of the whole situation. We're just looking at numbers for numbers' sake rather than what we're doing as a whole for the whole country, both for migrants and for communities, to increase that cohesion.
Kevin, we know that a lot of people who do express concerns about migration, it's about the pressure on local public services, isn't it? It's about whether the local schools, the local health service can cope, particularly when you get a significant number moving into a particular area.
Yes, I mean this is a big problem, and I have seen in parts of Kent exactly this problem whereby it's very difficult to get children into secondary schools of their choice because immigrants or refugees or people coming from the Ukraine have taken their places. And that in itself stirs up anger from the indigenous people who are saying, well, look, these migrants have come in and now we can't get our kids into the schools we want to get them into.
Do you think part of the problem here, Daniel, is that we've had some pretty tough rhetoric from the government, but it hasn't actually put in place the right policies to fulfil those promises? I mean, we've had successive governments and prime ministers promising to cut net migration, where the numbers, which have now come down slightly over the last year, have been inexorably rising. And it seems to be a whole series of different reasons for this. For example, we've now had a big increase in the families of students from particular areas that are boosting the numbers quite significantly. And it's part of the problem that you get all this rhetoric, but none of it has the impact which ministers have pledged.
I think this is a huge issue, and I think it's something that Kevin and I will probably agree on, is there's a lot of rhetoric from the government that doesn't come to anything. Where we might disagree, I don't know, but is that the policies themselves, I think we need to look at policies which are practical, which support everybody, as I said before. And we see policies which make grandiose statements, which then people see aren't being fulfilled. So that is going to increase hostility, and it's going to increase people's concerns about something because they're being told this is something we have to deal with and then not seeing anything dealt with. And that's why I do think that we need to invest in communities. We need to increase school places. Migrants on the whole tend to use fewer public services than a lot of people and still paying in tax in most cases. But there is the case of shortfalls in schools, and that is a problem for a lot of people. We've seen time and time again in other areas without migration, where it's lack of investment going in. And if we talk about raising wages and increasing taxes for that, perhaps we also need to be looking at how we invest in the services that we have, because we need migrants in a lot of cases to fulfill those. Teachers, NHS, care workers, this infrastructure is built upon migration as much as people saying it's overwhelmed by migration.
And is there also a problem, Kevin, that legal and illegal migration get somehow all wrapped up together? So we've had this huge focus on stopping the boats coming across the channel. And of course, some of those people who do make that perilous journey will end up being granted asylum and allowed to stay in the country. But they are a tiny fraction of the numbers who are allowed into the country legally.
Yes, I mean, you're quite right. The number of people that are coming over on the boats is dwarfed by the number of people that we are letting in legally. And you're right. We talk about illegal migration and then we tar everybody with the same brush. Unfortunately, illegal migration we have got to stop completely. That's a red line for me. This sort of migration, the migration where we grant visas to people, is something that the government have always had a problem with. I mean, if you go back to the Windrush generation after the war, we brought those in because we needed people from the Commonwealth to do jobs in the UK. So
and let me just ask you, Kevin, on that question of stopping the boats coming across the channel. We know that the Home Secretary has agreed with his French counterpart to beef up some of the security measures, the surveillance and so on, to stop the boats or try to do so. Is that something that's going to make a difference? Anything
that we can do on the French side will make a difference. We're seeing a difference within the last year. The French are being a lot more proactive on the beaches. I mean, we gave them a lot of money. They've bought very wisely a lot of kit to help them do it. And the French police are doing, on the whole, not a bad job. Daniel, do you think that there is a problem that legal and illegal migration all seem to be wrapped up together and many people perhaps fail to differentiate between the two and perhaps look at people who've come to this country and somehow assume that they've come here illegally when so much of the migration into this country is done perfectly legally?
I think there's a huge problem with people mistaking undocumented migrants, irregular entry, people coming legally. There was a survey done, I think it was by YouGov, only this week or last week, which showed majority of people think that the number of people entering via irregular routes massively dwarfs the number of people entering legally on visas. So I think it's a big problem with rhetoric. But I also think when we talk about small boats, we have to remember that they make up a fraction of irregular entry anyway, fewer than half in general. And what we're seeing at the moment is an increase in irregular routes going back to the old lorries. So all the work that we're pouring money into France to stop boats, and I firmly believe we do need to reduce the number of small boats because people are losing their lives doing that. But we're not seeing a real huge change in irregular entry because the routes are shifting. So we're putting all this money into one place, not dealing with the causes of these people moving, and therefore not really changing the situation as a whole anyway.
Well, that was Daniel Sohedge, director of the human rights organisation Stand for All, and Kevin Saunders, former chief immigration officer for the UK Border Force at Calais, speaking to me just a little earlier here on Times Radio.